Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today I'm your host, Nick Robin, and on this show we discuss everything basketball from the NBA to the brackets to the prep scene, and it's going to be interesting. I was thinking about college basketball recently, and really what are they going to do this year? I've heard some rumors that they're going to have a bubble, and I'm not sure how that's going to really work because these players, they still are students first, or I guess student athlete. Yes, student athlete. The student comes before the athlete. So yes, they're students first. They can't just leave and go to Orlando or somewhere in Texas where I've heard that might happen for 30, 60 days at a time to play basketball when they have their work in front of them. But let's be honest, do a lot of these college basketball players, especially the ones going to the league, actually do their work and homework? We've seen all the scandals over the years with cheating scandals. Not sure, can't remember exactly what school it was at. Might have been Louisville, or maybe that was just the stripper incident. A lot of these schools, tutors do most of the work for these athletes. I mean, I don't want to put them all in one bucket because not all players are created the same, so I don't want to generalize because I know there's some college athletes that are hard workers and really care about their academics, but for some of these athletes, I mean, a lot of them are just looking to go to the league. And when I was a student manager at San Diego State, it was mind-blowing to see the overconfidence of some of these players on the team. They all thought they were going to the league and going to make millions of dollars, live that life. And let's see, during my 4 years, only 2 players were drafted into the NBA during my 4 years. That's Jamal Franklin in 2013, Xavier Thames in 2014. It's really hard to make to the league. There's only 60 picks. There are 60 picks instead of 400 picks like there are in the NFL, or even like 600 picks like there are in Major League Baseball. Basically, what I was trying to get to is what is going to happen once college basketball starts. And like we did with college football, it looks like we're still no man's land. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to start at the normal time at the beginning, early November, like we've seen in most years. And even looking at the NBA, they might not restart until early March of 2021. I'm not sure how that is going to work exactly because, I mean, are they going to completely change the way the NBA is played in terms of the scheduling? Like, we're going to go from one thing to another. Like, are the finals now going to be in October or November, and we're going to completely flip the basketball season, and instead of it being from October to June, it's now going to be March to October or November? It's crazy. How much longer are we going to continue to manipulate the NBA season? Like, is this going to be a recurring theme for the next 3 to 4 years until, like, COVID is no longer an issue? Next year, like, Are they going to have another bubble for an entire season? Are they going to have a shortened season? Maybe they only play 50 games or 45 games instead of 82 games. There's just so much to figure out. And I've now gone on this tangent a little too long, so let's move on to today's show. First up, we're going to talk the Lakers' Game 2 win over the Miami Heat and whether or not this series is over. Then we're going to talk about Anthony Davis and whether he has a legitimate shot at winning Finals MVP. After last night's performance, I would say so, but I think there's a theme with trying to get LeBron 4 titles with 4 Finals MVPs to continue that GOAT conversation. Then next, we're going to look at Doc Rivers signing with Philadelphia, which I did predict in this previous week's podcast. And lastly, on Nick's picks, the best NFL players from the NBA. Let us continue with last night's 124-114 win by the Lakers over the Miami Heat. And really in the first half, the Lakers were just lackadaisical in the first half. They lacked energy. Aside from Dwight Howard, and it's funny, at the beginning of last night's game, Dwight was interviewed by Rachel Nichols, and they talked about how if Dwight got back to the finals, how he would not take it for granted and he would play his ass off, which he did in that first quarter. He was the only Laker that brought energy in the first quarter, grabbed 3 rebounds, had 6 points. He looked great in that first quarter, brought energy to a team that really lacked it throughout the first half. It looked like they were just messing around the entire half and letting Miami continue to stay in the game. To remember, Miami was missing 2 of their 3 best players. Bam Adebayo, by far their best defender and the only guy that could stop Anthony Davis, or at least attempt to stop Anthony Davis. And then Goran Dragic, their leading scorer throughout the playoffs, who's had plenty of clutch performances, especially in that Celtics series. So the Heat are down their 2 best players, and for most of the first half, I guess it was a 10-point game, but the Lakers should have been able to blow them out. But they were settling for way too many threes. They had an NBA Finals record, 27 three-point attempts in the first half. Green and KCP continued to struggle from deep. They combined to go 2 of 10 in the first half and finished the game 3 of 19. 3 of 19 from 3. So in the second half, they were 1 of 9 after going 2 of 10. And the Lakers still won by 10 points. And then just look at the free throw comparison in the first half. Miami had 15, the Lakers 10. They weren't driving to the basket. They weren't trying to, beside Anthony Davis, they weren't trying to get easy shots inside the paint. And again, settled for way too many three-pointers, just looking at the NBA Finals record they set last night. Going into the second half, the Lakers took a 68-54 lead. And forgot to point out, but Hero, youngest player in NBA Finals history to start a game. Pretty remarkable, since the Finals have now been around 74 years. And I would feel like back in those early days, you'd have some like random 19 or 20-year-old kind of fall into the Finals. But no, Hero, the youngest player to start a Finals game. And as I mentioned, Dwight Howard provided the energy from the jump, 6 points in the first quarter. But again, the Lakers lacked energy. They still put up the big numbers, taking a 14-point lead going into halftime. And you got to look at the spark plug, Rajon Rondo, who had an absolute beauty half-court alley-oop, Rondo to Davis. Crazy part is, it was on an inbound play. The defense had time to get back, and it was just a beautiful pass from past half court, Rondo to Davis to end the second half. Rondo, again, huge playoff Rondo, primetime Rondo, whatever you want to call him, huge for the Lakers down the stretch, especially in the first half. 9 points, 3 of 5 shooting. Again, seems to be hitting threes. He was 1 for 2 and made both his free throws. 4 assists and led the team. Again, this is a stupid stat, but we should still mention it. Led the team with a plus 15 plus minus in the first half. But overall, the entire game, LeBron and AD are the two best players on the court, and they were just too much for this hapless Heat team. Missing, again, their two best players, including their best rim protector in Bam Adebayo. With 4 minutes left in the third quarter, LeBron and AD were a combined 21 of 26, including 3 of 6 from deep for 47 points. Yes, that is not a mistake. They missed 5 field goals amongst the two on 26 attempts. They finished the game 29 of 45 for 65 points and 23 rebounds. And that's the reason the Heat did not win this game, because they played better than the Lakers last night. They shot better from the field. They shot better from three-point land. And they shot better from the line, getting there 34 times in comparison to the Lakers, who only got there 17 times. They shot double the amount of free throws than the Lakers. That honestly shouldn't happen when you have Anthony Davis, LeBron James, two guys that get to the rim whenever they want. They shouldn't be getting half the amount of free throw attempts as a Miami Heat team that's missing one of their best slashers in Dragic and one of their best inside presence in Bam Adebayo. They won this game because they're just too big. The Lakers shot a atrocious 59% from the free throw line. They shot 34% from three on 47 attempts. 47 attempts. They shot 97 field goals total. That means they shot probably nearly 60% from inside the arc, something that they should probably continue to do moving forward. If they had played that way the entire game, they'd probably win by 20 to 25 points instead of just 10 points as they did last night. I feel bad for the guys who bet on the Lakers spread last night, because right before game time, it went from 9.5 to 10.5. And again, the Lakers only won by 10 points. So for those who put in the bet yesterday, losing by half a point, that's never something you want. And on the offensive rebound differential, the Lakers were plus 10, 16 for the Lakers, 6 for the Heat. So is this series over? If Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic do not come back soon, yes, I would say so. And it's funny to point out that this is the only time in LeBron's career that he has had a 2-0 series lead in the NBA Finals. So imagine that. LeBron has never played with this big of a lead in a finals before. And let's just go back and track those other 9 finals. In 2007, a 22 LeBron James led the Cleveland Cavaliers, the hapless Cleveland Cavaliers, without another all-star player or even a player that comes close to LeBron's stature. Their second best player was Ilgauskas. So they go down 0-2 to a San Antonio Spurs team with a veteran presence of Ginobili, Parker, Duncan. They went down 0-2. They were swept. 2011, 1-1 going into Game 3. They went up 2-1. And that was one of only 2 times that LeBron had a finals lead after 3 games and blew it. We'll get to the second one in a little bit. So lost in 6 games. LeBron came up short. We all remember that. Next year, 2012, 1-1 series. Went on to win the next 3 games for LeBron's first title. 2013, against the Spurs, they even the series 1-1. They went down 2-1, came back to win on 7. The Ray Allen shot in Game 6. Then next year, 2014, even the series again at 1-1 after 2 games, lost 3 straight. 2015, they split the first 2 games against the Warriors. LeBron playing with 2 undrafted players as starters, Timothy Mozgov and Matthew Dellavedova, went up 2-1. They went up 2-1. The only time LeBron has held a lead in the finals, that in the 2011 against the Mavs, as I just spoke about, they lose in 6. Again, LeBron missing Kyrie Irving, missing Kevin Love. The next year, 2016, they're down 0-2 to the Warriors. We all know what happened next. They go down 3-1. They win in 7. LeBron with the big block. Kyrie Irving with the dagger 3 in Game 7. The next 2 years are just flops. They go down 0-2 to the Warriors in 2017. Lose in 5. 2018, go down 0-2 after the miraculous Game 1 by LeBron James. Scored 50 points in the NBA Finals. We all know what happened with J.R. Smith blowing The last minute shot attempt that he could have had to win the game. They go into OT. The Warriors take control and they sweep the series against LeBron the last time he was in the finals. And now back to 2020. Again, LeBron up 2-0 for the first time in his career in the NBA Finals. And I don't see him blowing a 2-0 lead against a team missing two of their three best players, while Anthony Davis has been almost untouchable on offense with a feathery touch, shooting from outside. Did not get to the free throw much last night, but did in game one. I see this, as of right now, being a sweep. Speaking of Anthony Davis, after this commercial break, we're going to look and see, can AD win Finals MVP over LeBron James? All of that right after this commercial break. Stay tuned.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
LeBron James has made the finals 10 times. In the 3 times that he has won the finals, he has won Finals MVP. Usually, they want to give it to, even when the best player on the team does not have the best performance in the finals, they seem to still give it to that best player on the winning team. Looking at such examples, there was 1996 when MJ had possibly his worst finals against the Seattle Supersonics when they put Gary Payton on him and he shut him down in games 4 and 5. They finally took it in game 6, but there's an argument to be made that Dennis Rodman should have won Finals MVP in that series. But voters typically like to give it to the best player on the team. Whether or not he had the best finals is up for discussion. Another prime example, 2008, Kevin Garnett lost Finals MVP over Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce had the dramatic injury, goes to the locker room. Dramatic injury, goes into a wheelchair, comes back, hits a couple clutch shots when Kevin Durant was that best player throughout the postseason that year for the Celtics. And now no one will ever know that because he didn't win the MVP that year, as it went to Kobe Bryant, who finally got his first MVP, first and only MVP. Another great example is 2010. Kobe had an atrocious Game 7, shot 5 of 24. He made the right defensive plays. He grabbed 12 rebounds or 15 rebounds. But was he really the best player in that series for the Lakers? Because you could go with Pau Gasol, who posted 18.5, nearly 12 rebounds a game, including 3.7 assists, a great passer as he's been throughout his career, shot 47.8% from the field and 72% from the free throw line. In comparison, Kobe, he put up the big points per game, 28.6, 8 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 2.1 steals. Just to also include, Pau Gasol did have 2.6 blocks a game. So big interior presence for the Lakers. But Kobe shot a abominable 40.5%. 40.5% for the series and 31.9% from 3-point land. But again, Kobe Bryant's icon in LA, the face of the Lakers throughout his career. So again, they're going to give it to Kobe Bryant when Pau Gasol had a pretty good argument that he should have won Finals MVP. He was more efficient from the field, was just as important on the defensive end as the best big on that team, and played nearly 42 minutes a game. So he was on the floor a ton, especially with Andrew Bynum only playing around 25 minutes a game as he was still coming back that year from injury, and the stage was just a little too big for Andrew Bynum at that time. And then lastly, the 2015 NBA Finals. And this one is interesting. LeBron lost to the Warriors in 6 games. The only reason it went 6 games was because of LeBron James. He led both teams in nearly every statistical category: points, rebounds, assists. And yeah, again, without LeBron James, he's playing without Kevin Love, without Kyrie Irving. He has Matthew Dellavedova and Timothy Mozgov, who's not even in the NBA anymore, as 2 of his starters. And he pushes a 67-win Warriors team to 6 games. But there has only been one occurrence in NBA history when a player has won Finals MVP while losing the Finals. And that was Jerry West in 1969 against the Celtics, Bill Russell's last Finals, and the Lakers took him to 7 games. Jerry West posted a ridiculous 38 points per game, 49% shooting, and added in 7.5 assists a game. One time in NBA history it's happened. I don't think we'll ever see that ever again, where a player that lost the Finals won Finals MVP. Now let's move on to what I wanted to get to here, which was Anthony Davis. And how good does Anthony Davis have to play to win Finals MVP over his teammate LeBron James? There's a LeBron James bias out there because we want to see him. We want to continue this GOAT conversation. We want it to be an actual debate. But if LeBron wins his Finals but does not win Finals MVP, I think that is kind of a discredit to him that he wasn't the best player on his team in this year's Finals. If we're looking throughout the entire playoffs, and this is something that a lot of bloggers, podcasters, and writers have talked about, there needs to be an overall playoff MVP. Because if we look at the numbers, LeBron James is the playoff MVP for the 2020 postseason. And not just the numbers, LeBron is a player that makes this team go. He's the catalyst, the point guard. He gets Anthony Davis those cleaner looks that he's not used to when he played in New Orleans with Drew Holiday and whatever garbage guards they threw out there for him. Not saying Drew Holiday is a garbage guard, because he is not. He's an elite talent. Should have been a first or second team all defensive player this year, but was totally snubbed by the writers. But let's take a look at the numbers, because they do tell half of the story. LeBron and Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis averages 2 more points a game, 29.3. LeBron, 27. Rebounds. LeBron is actually averaging 10.4 rebounds compared to Anthony Davis's 9.6, and averaging nearly 9 assists compared to 3.5 for Anthony Davis. LeBron shooting a ridiculous 54.7% on 5.6 threes per game as well. Anthony Davis, 57.9%. And then at the defensive side, LeBron James averaging more steals, 1.2 to 1.1 for Anthony Davis, and blocks. Anthony Davis has a slight lead with 1.2. LeBron, 0.9 blocks a game in his age 35 season. For a player that has been criticized so much the last couple of years for not playing defense, he is locked in right now. He is playing both ends of the court. They're playing nearly identical minutes. Anthony Davis has got him by 1 more minute per game. But let's just take a step back and appreciate what we're seeing right now. This is probably the most dominant playoff performance by a duo we are seeing in NBA history. I might be getting carried a little bit away here, but we have 2 guys averaging 25 plus points, nearly both averaging 10 plus rebounds. They're getting to the line 7 times and 9.3 times a game. LeBron with 7, Anthony Davis with 9.3. So they are both locked in right now on the offensive side as well as the defensive side of the ball. They've only lost 3 games this entire playoffs. They're currently 14-3. If they go through with this sweep, this will be one of the most dominant playoff runs that we have ever seen. Outside of the 2017 Warriors that I believe lost only 1 game, which was in the finals to Cleveland, we have almost never seen anything like this. And this is a team where you're putting Anthony Davis out there and LeBron and just throwing 3 other dudes on the court. And it doesn't matter who those 3 other guys are because LeBron and AD are that dominant. But as I said, LeBron is the catalyst of the team. He is the point guard. He makes this team go. Without him, they would not be in the finals. They would barely be a playoff team. If it was just Anthony Davis, no LeBron, we're looking at an 8, maybe 7 seed team in the Western Conference. Because if you take away LeBron, the other teammates around him are not much better than the teammates that AD had in New Orleans. What LeBron and AD are doing right now, we haven't seen anything like this. Well, we have one other time. Kobe and Shaq, 20 years ago, 18 years ago, when they were three-peating, 2000, 2001, 2002. But what LeBron and AD are doing right now even trumps what Kobe and Shaq did back in those early 2000s. We have 2 guys averaging 25-plus points, 9-plus rebounds, 3-plus assists. In LeBron's case, he's averaging triple that. Both shooting nearly 55% from the field. It is unfathomable what we are seeing right now from these 2 players, how efficient they are. And they just feed off each other. And the one thing that Kobe and Shaq did not have is there's no jealousy amongst the 2. They don't care who scores, who gets the rebound, who dishes out the assist. All they care about is winning. And I know that's a cliche to say, but a lot of the times in the NBA, that's not the number one factor on a lot of players' minds, and that's why they don't get to the finals and they don't win championships like LeBron has done in his career. There's contract disputes. There's disputes over who's taking the shots, who's getting the last shot. But with AD and LeBron, they don't care. They just want to win a title. LeBron wants to get number 4, and he wants to get Anthony Davis his first. Now let's look at the finals numbers as they stand 2 games in. Anthony Davis has been near perfection. His shooting splits are ridiculous. He is shooting 63% from the field, 60% from 3, but again, that's only on 5 attempts, and a perfect 11 for 11 from the free throw line. Add in 11.5 rebounds a game, 3 assists, a block and a half for 33 points a game. Just dominating in the paint against an undermanned Heat team. And then we look at LeBron. 29 points per game, not shooting 63%, but 54.5% from the field, 43.8% on 12 attempts from three-point land, 11 rebounds a game, and 9 assists. The free throws, as they've been throughout his career, are a struggle as he currently is shooting 61.7% from the free throw line. We are comparing apples and apples here. 2 players, 2 dominant players, LeBron and AD, having almost similar finals results after 2 games. Anthony Davis has again been more efficient, but LeBron's the one feeding him the ball. He has 18 assists over 2 games. He is running this offense to perfection. And this is while the Lakers don't even look like they're fully dialed in right now because the Heat aren't giving them much to work with. They're missing their 2 best players. And again, they looked lackadaisical last night, settling for way too many 3-pointers, not getting to the rim as much as they should. Who should be Finals MVP? Who has been the best of the 2? If we're looking at the finals right now, it's probably AD. But again, LeBron James is the point guard. He's the one that makes this team go. Without him, they're not in this situation. But Anthony Davis has played so well that we can't just throw him to the side. These next two games are going to tell a lot about who wins Finals MVP, because I don't think this game's going past 4 games. It's going to be a sweep, especially if the two players on the Heat don't come back soon. The Lakers toyed around with them last night and still won by double digits. But what will this do to LeBron's legacy if he does not win Finals MVP? Will he no longer have a legitimate case at being the GOAT over MJ? If we look at Kareem, he did not win Finals MVP in every Finals that he won. In fact, he only won 2 Finals MVPs out of 6 Finals victories. LeBron already has more than that. If LeBron does win this Finals and doesn't come home with the MVP, I think he still passes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the second best player of all time. Because in my opinion, it's still Michael, Kareem, and LeBron. Kareem has the longevity, the all-time scoring leader, the 6 Finals wins, the 2 Finals MVPs, and the 5 regular season MVPs to go with it. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on in these next 2 games, because really that's the only storyline we have left. I think a winner has already been decided. I don't want to say that too early because things could change for the Heat, but the way they played in the last 2 games, I don't see anything changing, especially when the Heat outshot the Lakers last night. Moving on, the next 2 games, the biggest storyline is who's taking home Finals MVP. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens over the next couple days. Now moving on, Doc Rivers, less than 72 hours after stepping down as head coach of the LA Clippers, has found himself a new home in the city of brotherly love with the Philadelphia 76ers. Is he going to be able to figure out the conundrum between Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, his 2 young superstars? We're getting into that after this commercial break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to Extreme Cage Fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
On Monday, Doc Rivers shockingly stepped down as head coach of the LA Clippers, and less than 72 hours later, he is now the new head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers on a 5-year contract. There must have been some kind of inside talk while he was still head coach of the Clippers, because I think he might have fought a little harder to stay as the Clippers head coach, although we know Steve Ballmer was done with it. He was upset that he spent so much money paying his coaching staff along with giving up so many assets and acquiring Paul George last summer. Yeah, this really came and went quickly. Doc Rivers probably knew that he would be in the running for the head coach of the Sixers job, and he inherits a team very similar to what he had coming into LA 7 years ago. Similar to the Clippers team he inherited in 2013-2014, the 76ers are a talented team with 2 superstar players that have not lived up to their potential thus far. In 2013-14, the Clippers were coming off a 57-win season. The Sixers are coming off a disappointing 43-30 season. They were dominant at home with a record of 31-4, but on the road, they were worse than the New York Knicks with a record of 13-26. 13 games below 500 with a team that has two of the top 15 players in the NBA in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. So again, like he did in LA, he will be inheriting a team with two, not one, but two young superstar players in Joel Embiid, 26 years old, Ben Simmons, 24. Is Doc going to have more success in Philly than he did in LA? The good news for Doc is there is no immediate rush. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are both locked in multi-year contracts where in LA they're in win-now mode. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George could bounce after next season. And if the Clippers don't at least make it to a conference finals, I would say if they don't even make it to at least the finals, it's unlikely that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are going to stay in LA. And I think this is just what Doc needed. A reset, a restart, getting out of this whole situation that has been the Clippers over the last 7 years. Really was never a groove for Doc in LA. There was the fiasco, disaster with him being the GM/head coach. That didn't work out as well. And then in 3 years after he gets in the job, he sees his best player, Chris Paul, leave to go to the Rockets. And then that next season, he sees Blake Griffin traded to the Detroit Pistons. And now he's left with none of his big three of DeAndre Jordan, who signed to play with Dallas that year as well. In Philadelphia, Doc has a chance to mentor Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, and he's shown that he has a history of helping young superstars fulfill their potential. We saw it with Griffin in LA. We saw it with Tobias Harris, not quite a superstar, but he had his best success with Doc Rivers, averaging 20-plus points and becoming an all-star. He'll be reunited with Tobias Harris in Philadelphia. So he has Tobias Harris, he has Josh Richardson, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons. That's a solid core to build around. They haven't given up all their assets like the Clippers do, so he has a little bit more to work with, can bring in rookies on lesser contracts than veterans that demand more money. So that will be key during his time in Philly. And it's not like he's on a 2 or a 3-year contract. He has a 5-year contract that's going to give him a lot of time to figure out what he wants to do with this team, how they're going to play moving forward, because they haven't found much success the last couple years. There's been a bunch of revolving doors. There's been the media attention about Brett Brown, that he's not the right coach for this team. And now they have a clean slate with Doc Rivers, who, although I would say he might be a little bit overrated, he's won one championship in his 20-plus years as a head coach. I think can bring a lot of structure for a team that was very inconsistent last season. And I think there's now pressure on Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, because for the last several years, they've been blaming Brett Brown on why this team has not reached their full potential. So with Doc Rivers now in place, there are no excuses. There's got to be accountability for Ben and Joel, and I think Doc will keep them in check. And if things do not work out early on in the season, or once they get to the All-Star break, it might be time to trade Ben and Joel, to choose one, to go in one direction, build your team around one of your two superstars, and trade whichever one you don't want while they're still at peak value on the market. In my opinion, I think you stay with Ben Simmons. Joel might have the higher ceiling in terms of his dominance, but Ben Simmons is a transcendent passer, can cover positions 1 through 5. You can put him on anyone, so he can switch anything, and surround him with shooters. Because as we know, the guy is basically afraid to shoot from behind the arc. It's been more than a couple of years now. He doesn't seem to be improving too much. But if you surround him with three-point shooters, to go with Tobias Harris, who has been a pretty solid shooter throughout his career, along with other three-point snipers, I think this team could be very good. I know Joel Embiid is a special talent. He has had the injury issues in the past. For his credit, though, he has been very healthy these last couple years and has avoided major injuries. If anything, though, Ben Simmons now might be the one with the injury concerns, especially how he ended this season. But I think if Ben Simmons can stay healthy, that is who you stick with. He's 24 years old. He's younger, high basketball IQ, and I think he can take it to another level too. And I think Doc Rivers is the coach that can do that for him. Him and Chris Paul were great together while it lasted, with Chris Paul leading the league in assists in 2 out of the 4 seasons under Doc Rivers. I think Doc can do the same for Ben Simmons. You also have to look at what he did for Blake Griffin. In 2014-2015, Blake Griffin was the 3rd best player in the league. He finished 3rd in MVP voting, so technically 3rd best player for that season. Doc has shown that he can get the best out of his players. Although, yes, the playoff concerns are there, but I think eventually he'll get over that hump. He did it before with the Celtics. I know that was a different team with 3 veteran players, all age 30 or above at the time. But I think with the right plan in motion, once they figure out, I think the biggest thing is if Joel and Embiid are going to work out together or if they have to go in another direction altogether. Now, looking at the Clippers situation, who is going to take over that vacant head coaching spot? Is it Tyronn Lue? Is it Sam Cassell, who have both been assistants with the team the last couple years? Sam Cassell, I believe for the last 5, maybe 6 seasons, he has been on the Clippers bench. Or do they go outside of the organization, bring in a whole new mindset to get away from Doc and his previous coaching staff as much as possible? They have to bring in the right guy for this job, someone who can manage 2 superstars in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, someone who can get the best out of them. These guys are not vocal leaders. They need to be more like Patrick Beverley. Why does the best player on the team always have to be the leader of the team? Yes, I know the whole leading by example thing, but Patrick Beverley, he brings something that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George just don't have, which is just that ferocity, that chip on your shoulder that he plays with game in and game out. That is why he has gotten to where he is at the NBA level. It wasn't the talent, but the drive and the work ethic. And if every player on the Clipper could lead by that example, they would be world champions right now. Quickly back to the Doc Rivers as a new head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers before we go to a break. This partnership has a lot of upside here, but it's on Doc, it's on Joel Embiid, it's on Simmons to see how things are going to play out. It's not like Doc is going to magically come in and fix everything that was wrong with this 2019-2020 roster. Joel Embiid and Al Horford aren't going to magically complement each other, unlike they did last year. It's time to stop with the excuses. You now have a clean slate with a new head coach. Let's see what this team is made out of. They might be one of the most talented teams in the NBA, but they haven't shown that. They definitely did not show that last year, especially in the embarrassing first-round sweep to the Celtics. I know they were missing their second or first best player, however you want to look at it, in Ben Simmons, but the fact that they were swept out of the first round, that shouldn't be happening, especially when you have one of the most dominant players in the league in Joel Embiid. He was great last year. His true shooting percentage and three-point percentage went up, but he needs to get back to that defensive presence that he had in 2017-2018. That's the only way this team is going to fulfill its potential and get back to the finals, where the 76ers haven't been since 2001, and they haven't won a championship since 1982-83. We're nearly going on 40 years now. Congrats to Doc Rivers on becoming the new head coach of the 76ers. He's inherited one of the better head coaching vacancies in the NBA, but it doesn't come with its own troubles. But I don't think the 76ers could have chosen any better man for the job than Doc Rivers. The guy is a veteran head coach. He has the experience working with several superstars, from Tracy McGrady to Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin. he can deal with the egos. He can work around that. And that's the issue that has been the constant over the last several years in Philadelphia. No better man for the job in the NBA. After this commercial break, we're going into Nick's picks. And on today's segment, the best NBA players that would make great football players. Don't go anywhere because we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Now, moving on to Nick's picks, and today we are discussing the best second-round draft picks since 2000. And for those out there that don't know, second-round draft picks don't get guaranteed contracts, which is absurd because there's only 2 rounds in the NBA draft every year. So that's only 60 players that get selected to be a part of the National Basketball Association. Unlike football that has 7 rounds and Major League Baseball that has 40 rounds, this year they actually only had 5 rounds due to COVID. And it just, I think it's mind-boggling that only 60 players every year out of all 351 Division I college basketball teams, out of all the professional leagues in the world, in Europe, China, Serbia. It's just absurd that only 60 players get drafted because there's so many talented basketball players in the world, and it just shows how good you have to be to make it at this level. So, and the crazy part is all these second-round draft picks more than likely are not going to be making an impact in the NBA, but there are some players that do. So looking at some of the nominees here, there's Montrezl Harrell, Spencer Dinwiddie, Patrick Beverley, Chris Middleton, just to name some current active players. And these guys weren't even good enough to make our list. But some second-round players that we have to remember since 2000, we've seen one of the best shooters of all time in Kyle Korver, one of the better scorers in Milwaukee Bucks history in Michael Redd, for all of you that don't remember him. And we've seen a lot of contributors to title-winning teams, such as Trevor Ariza with the Lakers. So there are a lot of talented players that do come out of the second round, and typically they don't get the same respect, and they really have to earn every minute they go out and play. It's kind of like being a second-round draft pick is kind of like being almost a walk-on on a college basketball team where you basically have to earn every minute you get out there. It's like you were still drafted to the NBA, but not really. You don't have the same respect as someone who is a lottery pick or a first-round draft pick where they put in more money on you, where they kind of give you an incentivized to play you over guys who are second-round draft picks that are floating back and forth between the G League and the NBA. So a lot of these players come from humbling backgrounds. A lot of them were top players in college. That's draft stock took a hit right before the draft. So we're going to get into it now. And as always, we start with the honorable mentions. And I'm going to go with a couple more than usual today. So I'm going to start with Monte Ellis. So we're not in the top 5 yet. We're doing honorable mentions. So Monte Ellis drafted 40th overall out of high school by the Golden State Warriors. The guy averaged 38.4 points per game as a senior. In the NBA, he averaged nearly 25 points a game on 2 separate occasions. One time over 25, the other time right below. And it's funny because you were thinking the Warriors years ago, back in 2010, 2011, they were debating who to keep, Stephen Curry or Monte Ellis. Luckily for the Warriors, they made the right decision, trading Monte Ellis, keeping Stephen Curry. And, people will see how that's worked out with 5 straight finals appearances, 3 NBA championships. But Monte Ellis was no scrub himself. The guy averaged nearly 18 points and 4.5 assists a game for his career. He was part of the, I believe, Warriors team that upset the number 1 seeded Mavs. That was their first playoff appearance in 12 years. And one thing that you love to see from a player who's 6'2", 6'3", barely 180 pounds is he twice led the league in minutes played. And this is a guy who's not that big, who gets to the rim a lot, takes a lot of hits. So the fact that he was able to lead the league back-to-back seasons in minutes per game is very impressive. Now, moving on to one of the most, I think at this point he might be a little bit overrated, but has made a huge impact and was one of the best shooters in his generation, and that is Danny Green, selected 46 overall by Cleveland, coming out of North Carolina. And some fun facts for you here. Number 1, he has the most 3-point field goals made in finals history at 27, which he did in the 2013 NBA Finals against the Miami Heat, who historically came back with a Ray Allen shot and were seconds away from losing. And at one point in that series, he was 25 of 38 from 3. So he was making nearly 70% of his threes. Unfortunately, this record ended up being broken by Stephen Curry in the 2016 NBA Finals. Number 2, fun fact is, along with Michael Jordan and James Worthy, he is the only player to win both an NCAA championship, which he did in 2009 with Tyler Hansbrough in North Carolina, and an NBA championship, which he's done on 2 occasions, in 2014 with the Spurs and last year with the Toronto Raptors. He's your quintessential 3-and-D player that you want on your team these days, and a career 40.2% three-point shooter, which is best for top 50 all time. Now, moving on to a player who I think is definitely going to be in the top 5 once this is all said and done, and that is Chris Middleton. He was drafted 39th overall by Detroit and ends up on the Milwaukee Bucks. This year, he was nearly became, and I mean barely almost became, the number 10 player to shoot 50% from the field, 40% from 3, and 90% from the free throw line. To be exact, he was 49.9%. 49.9% from the field, 41.8% from 3, and 90.8% from the free throw line. So we're talking about if he had one more extra made field goal, he would have become the 10th member of the 50-40-90 club. He is now a 2-time All-Star and probably the most ideal second option to Giannis, and hopefully can bring Milwaukee their first NBA championship since 1971. So 49 years in the making. Chris Middleton, a player who doesn't need the ball in his hands at all time, can also guard small forwards and power forwards. And like Danny Green, is probably a step up in terms of the superb 3-and-D guy that you need on your championship team. Now, moving on to the two players that were at the top of my honorable mention list. And we're starting first with Agent Zero, Gilbert Arenas, who in 2001 was selected 31st overall by the Golden State Warriors out of University of Arizona. He made a championship appearance against the Blue Devils that year. Unfortunately, they lost. And during his time in the NBA, although I feel like he kind of came and went, he was a 3-time All-Star, making 3 All-League teams, a second team appearance in 2007, and a third team appearance in 2005-06. He got the nickname Agent Zero due to the fact that he wore number 0, which was reference to the number of minutes critics said he would play in the NBA, and the fact that he became known as one of the most clutch players in the league. From 2002 to 2007, he averaged 24 points and 5.7 assists per game. Although he was more of a volume shooter, as he shot only 42.7% from the field, 36% from 3, which is great but not remarkable, which is solid but not remarkable, on 6.3 attempts per game. So he's definitely a player that I think might even thrive more today with how much players are shooting from the perimeter. He does, though, have a 60-point game against the Lakers in 2006 and holds the highest scoring average by a second-round draft pick since 2000. Unfortunately, in 2010, he signed a 6-year, $111 million contract, and knee injuries from that point derailed his career, and he was kind of out of the league. And we could talk about the firearm incident, but due to the injuries and stupid off-the-court incidents, he has found himself out of league by the year 2012. So he did have a solid decade in the NBA, but due to some boneheaded mistakes, he is now out of the league. But at the time, he was one of the most exciting players of the mid-2000s. And now, my next guy, another honorable mention to one of the smallest players, but one of the smallest, most impactful players in NBA history, Isaiah Thomas, drafted 60th overall by Sacramento in 2011. He's been the best player on an Eastern Conference Finals team, Celtics against the Cavs in 2017, where he made an All-NBA second team. So he was rated a top 10 player in the league at only 5'9". And he is the shortest player to record a triple-double and make multiple All-Star team appearances. Unfortunately, after the 2017 season, where he heroically played in an NBA game after the death of his sister, he was traded to Cleveland in what might be looked at one of the coldest moves ever by an organization, which really just shows that this is a business. There is no loyalty. He went on to play for the Cavaliers, the Lakers, the Wizards, and has been dealing with hip injuries ever since. So, yes, it was a shitty move on the part of the Celtics, but they saw what was happening and made the correct business decision, and it looks like it's helped them out, as they are now one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference and have a legitimate shot at making not only the Eastern Conference Finals, but the finals themselves. Now, moving on into our top 5, and the first player on this list has a long career left ahead of him, but has already been one of the most impactful players in the league today, has made a first-team All-League, and is already 10th all-time in career triple-doubles at age 25, and that is Nikola Jokic, who has come into the bubble and looks to have lost at least 20 to 25 pounds, Again, he was 2019 All-NBA and was drafted 41st overall by Denver in 2014. He was one of the top players in Serbia, taking home the Serbian Player of the Year award in 2018. And again, at only 25 years old, he still has a long, illustrious career ahead of him. At 7 foot, he at times plays the point guard position, which is unworldly at his height and size. And last year finished third in MVP voting. So Nikola Jokic, number 5 on my list, but trending forward. Next, one of the best 6 men in NBA history, Lou Williams. In 2005, he was selected 45th by Philly, straight out of high school. He's a 3-time 6th Man of the Year award, winning the award in 2015 with the Raptors, 18 and 19 with the Clippers. And as of last season, he has the most career points off the bench. And during his time with LA the last 3 years, he has, instead of trajectory going down, he's gone up, averaging 20.5 points a game and 5.5 assists. And he's formed one of the best pick and roll duos in the league with Montrezl Harrell. Although typical of guys, second round picks or NBA journeymen, he's played for 6 teams. And he's the first player in league history to record at least 30 points, 10 steals, and 7 assists in the game. Last year, he probably had his most marquee moment in the NBA as he had 36 points and 11 assists in helping the Clippers overcome a 31-point deficit against the Warriors in the first round. That is the biggest comeback in NBA playoff history. Not too bad for a second-round draft pick out of high school. Now, moving on to number 3, we have one of the greatest role players / secondary players in NBA history. He's a Swiss Army knife, can do a little bit of everything. He's a 3-time NBA championship, a 3-time All-Star, and that is Draymond Green. He's been voted a top 15 player in the league 2 times, getting a second All-NBA team in 2016 and a third team in 2017, along with winning Defensive Player of the Year. And he's always just been a winner, looking at his 2 Final Four appearances at Michigan State during his 4-year college career. And that's kind of what I want to talk about here with Draymond Green, is the fact that he was a winner throughout college, got better every season, won numerous awards, was a consensus All-American, but for some reason, the fact that he stayed 4 years hurt his draft stock, and he ended up being a second-round pick instead of a lottery pick. So just because someone stays in college 4 years, it makes them somehow less valuable to a player who's coming out at 19, 20, that's going to need a couple years to develop anyways, unlike someone like Draymond Green who could come into the league right away and give you immediate impact. Just something to think about there for all the GMs out there. So moving on to number 2, and probably one of the more underrated players of the last 15 to 20 years, drafted 47th overall by the Utah Jazz, Paul Millsap. So he's a 4-time All-Star, and similar to Draymond Green, he's an all-around solid player with no one strength or any one weakness. And he's number 1 all-time in win shares for second-round draft picks since 2000. And he's a consistent winner as he's made the playoffs in 11 of his 14 years in the NBA. And now, moving on lastly, so before, let's go back a little bit. So at number 5, we had Nikola Jokic, the young 7-foot point guard center from the Denver Nuggets. Number 4, Lou Will. Number 3, Draymond Green. Number 2, Paul Millsap. And lastly, my number 1 overall, best second-round draft pick since 2000, Marc Gasol. And it's interesting, before we saw Marc Gasol in the NBA, his rights were actually traded for his own brother. And that actually, in retrospect, that was a very successful trade for the Lakers, although they did lose out on Marc Gasol, who's perhaps one of the greatest European players of all time. So Marc Gasol is traded to Memphis in 2007, 2008. That leads to back-to-back titles for the Lakers. Gasol goes on to the Memphis Grizzlies and is probably arguably the greatest player in Memphis Grizzlies history. He makes 2 All-NBA teams, 2015 first team, 2013 second team. He's a 3-time All-Star. He wins the 2013 NBA Defensive Player of the Year. So we now have 2 second-round picks that have gone on to be the best defensive player in the NBA. Pretty remarkable. He also won silver medals in the 2008 and 2012 Olympics, losing both years to Team USA. And he has kind of revolutionized the center position, kind of like a Bill Walton-esque, great passer, especially the further and further he comes into he went into his career, adjusted to this new 3-point generation, and has learned to be a very adequate 3-point shooter. And to top it all off, he reached the top of the tower and was a 2019 NBA champion for the Toronto Raptors. So he's had a very successful career. Perhaps I'd say a top 10, top 15 European player of all time. So that's your list for you guys today. And on Nick's picks, we did best second-round draft picks since 2000, starting with number 5, Nikola Jokic, who perhaps will be number 1 on this list once it's all said and done. Number 4, Lou Will. Number 3, Draymond Green. Number 2, Paul Millsap. And number 1, Marc Gasol. If you have any disagreements or want to say something about this list, please feel free to reach out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And as always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you to all, and to all, a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.